recommended to me by several people in our revolution and the Bernie movement itself. She is running
Mhm.
in Congressional District New York 15, Samelys
Mhm.
Lopez.
Mhm.
And, I'm sorry.
No, I'm smiling because you said it
Oh,
right.
I thought you said something. You've been kind of blowing up a bit, which is awesome. We love
Mm.
to see activists,
Mhm.
getting attention. Um, so that is what you consider yourself. You do consider yourself a community organizer and an activist.
Mhm.
So now one of your biggest passions is a homes guarantee,
Mhm.
and you want to do the Fair Chance Housing Act in New York.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
can you kind of touch on your background and why you're kind of making that the pinnacle of your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Joy, thank you so much for having me on the show. For all the viewers that are listening, thank you so much for your support on social media, Be Phone Bank. Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to anybody who's suffering with the coronavirus right now, and my love, goes out to you. If you happen to live in the district and you need groceries or you need someone to talk to get you through this crisis, go to lopezforthepeople.com. Our campaign is about love and empathy. And I strongly feel like that's one of the most revolutionary things that we could do in our society right now, because I think that's missing in our politics and our government. And we need to center love and empathy in everything that we do. So my heart goes out to you, and I send you love and light from the Boogie Now. So thank you so much for having me, Joy. The reason I'm fighting for a homes guarantee, and it's probably the top priority in our campaign, is because of the district that I come from. So the 15th congressional district is known as the poorest congressional district in the country, and it's 97% people of color, Black and brown. And we're experiencing a gentrification crisis, a displacement crisis in the community. We have rents that are really high. We have people that are living in overcrowded conditions. You have a lot of homelessness. So right now with COVID, if you don't have access to soap and running water and housing, it's a public health crisis in and of itself that's going to predispose you to get the coronavirus to begin with. So, my commitment to housing justice actually stems from my own personal experiences growing up in the shelter system with my family. And I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican. I was born in Bayamón, Puerto Rico. I came here to this country when my mom divorced my dad around the time that I was 2 years old, and she came here to work as a seamstress. And she worked in sweatshops to make ends meet before New York City got gentrified. So she would pick me up from elementary school when there was not enough money for childcare, and I would hang out at her sweatshop and I would just do the homework there. And unfortunately, she ended up being a domestic violence survivor, and because of that, we ended up in the shelter system. And that's why, that's where we went to escape what was going on at home, and it gave us a second opportunity at life. So we spent time there. My brother was born there. And then eventually we ended up getting an apartment in the South Bronx. And I always share that story because it's directly impacted people that should be creating policy and laws that impact our society. Because when you focus on the most marginalized and you come up with laws that promote their cause and their suffering and they get elevated, everybody in society benefits. So really, my commitment to the housing justice movement is due to my experiences with homelessness. And the experiences of my family, unfortunately, are not unique at all to my family. There's so many people in the 15th congressional district and even like throughout the country that are experiencing those issues. So housing justice is at the top of my priorities because of that. Because when we were door knocking before the coronavirus epidemic hit, we listened to people's stories that they're a paycheck away from being homeless, living in lonely conditions. The New York City Housing Authority is definitely something that we need to fight for. We need to, reinvest in our public housing stock in this country as a collective good. So, people are living in conditions that are not dignified, and that's not who we are as Americans. And in the richest country in the world, there shouldn't be things like homelessness and people living on the streets and having to rely on the shelter system to get by. So the Homes Guarantee platform is saying we're going to build 12 million units of housing over the next decade. And, we're going to center directly impacted people in that process. And we're going to decommodify the production of housing. So it won't be based on profit. It'll be based on just housing people as it should be. And my commitment to a homes guarantee, the reason I'm committed to that also is because I'm not taking any corporate PAC money, any real estate developer money, and that's one of the requirements of running as a candidate on this platform. And this platform was envisioned by housing justice advocates and people that are formerly homeless and people that are, struggling to get by. They got together throughout the country to envision this bold housing policy platform. And if I were to win this election, I would join Ilhan Omar like tomorrow and be like, listen, I want to co-sponsor your Homes for All Act that she introduced earlier this year. So we need to end homelessness in America. And that's why we're focusing on it so strongly.
Absolutely. Now, you previously have actually worked in building housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What was that
So
like, being able to politically kind of be behind the scenes and work to try and deal with those problems?
Yeah, no, definitely. The reason, let me just take it a step back. Every decision that I've ever made in my life, whether it's my commitment to social justice, fighting for the underdog, centering community organizing, everything that we do, and housing production, is because I went through the system. So that informed everything that I've ever done in my life. So because of that, I worked for Congressman Jose Serrano actually for a little bit. Who's an outgoing Congress member who's leaving because he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And he's actually one of the most progressive members in Congress. So it'll be a shame for that seat to fall in the hands of corporate Democrats that basically will tarnish his legacy and take his legacy a couple of steps back. We need someone that can respect that legacy and take it to the next level. So I want to, give that shout out. So what I learned working in his office is that there's a lot of housing insecurity. And when I was directing constituent services, there were a lot of people that came to our office because they had rent arrears and they didn't know how to pay for it and they were going to be kicked out of their apartment. So then I would reach out to the welfare office to secure what's called one-shot deals for people so that their rent arrears can be eliminated through a grant. And then I would be successful in like 90% of the cases. But then 6 months, 7 months down the road, the same people would come back with the same issue. So I just felt like as great as this experience is working here, I don't feel like I'm making a dent in the affordable housing crisis. So then I ended up getting a master's in urban planning with a focus in community and housing development from the Wagner School of Public Service at NYU, where I learned generally about the development process, about affordable housing finance, because I wanted to be a part of the creative process of building housing in the community. And so I wanted to prevent other families and children from ending up in that situation. And then after I graduated, I dedicated 10 years of my life to doing just that, to helping to build housing in vulnerable communities to prevent people from ending up in the shelter system or in the streets. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. And on the side, I've also organized for housing justice. And I'm a housing justice for all advocate and activist in the Housing Justice for All Coalition here in New York State, which that movement was instrumental in fighting for and securing one of the most progressive pro-tenant rent reforms that New York State has seen in a generation. So I think that is an amazing coalition that the entire country should be looking to for guidance, and we should amplify the success of the Housing Justice for All Coalition throughout the country. So yeah, I have experience organizing in terms of advocating for more housing justice and also building housing as well.
Awesome. So right now we are in a really dire place the past 2 months or so. And we're seeing all across the country, people are being threatened with being kicked out of their apartments and everything. Are your constituents reaching out to you and about the Homes Guarantee and saying, look, please tell me more. Will this help me? Do you find that there's a sense of urgency in your constituents?
Yeah, definitely. People want housing more than ever before because they understand the connection. And in terms of what we're doing around our phone banking, because obviously we can't door knock because of what's happening with the coronavirus. So what we've done is we have shifted from a door knocking strategy to a phone banking strategy to check up on our neighbors, and we're engaging in mutual aid. We're checking up on people to see how their mental health is doing, if to see if they need any food, to see if they need groceries. So I have personally delivered groceries to people that are in need. And yeah, like hunger is a really huge issue in addition to housing. But what we're seeing is that hunger is something that people are experiencing because a lot of people in my community are without a job. A lot of people in my community are subsidizing, the city's way of life because, they're the delivery workers, the essential workers, the people that basically like hold our community and our society together, the workers. And, like the workers are the ones that create the wealth in this country. And I think with this pandemic, what it's shown is that we need to re-envision a different system. We need to engage in a radical paradigm shift that centers the workers' plight and the plight of the undocumented that are paying into the system, right? They pay taxes, but then they're not getting anything back in terms of the stimulus package, and they're subsidizing our way of life. So I think we need to just engage in a paradigm shift that just centers the life of the worker and the most oppressed in our society, because it's the 99% that basically like creates the wealth in this country, and we need to rectify the imbalance that exists at the moment. And the 1% needs to, pay its fair share in taxes. And, we need to push for a radical redistribution of political, economic, and social power that flows from the 1% to the 99%. So I would say like homelessness and hunger, lack of healthcare as well is something that we hear a lot, because so many people have lost their jobs. A lot of people don't have healthcare. And our phone banks were like, do you think it's right that healthcare is tied to whether you have a job or not? Like it should be like a universal thing. You shouldn't have to worry about dying or like dying in debt because you're sick. And a lot of people that have coronavirus are not able to get the healthcare that they need because they don't have health insurance. So people are dying because our system is messed up and doesn't represent us.
Absolutely. Are you finding that people are more receptive to Medicare for All now, that we are in this pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that what this pandemic has shown is, what we just talked about. People want to see something different. People understand that the system that we have right now is just not cutting it. And, I'm hopeful that this pandemic will be a catalyst that will help us get, to that place where we look at things like healthcare, housing, and childcare as a collective good that we need to organize around so that we can get the care that our society needs, that our communities need. Because we pay taxes, like we are funding like the government, you know what I mean? So we need to get something back, and we're not getting our fair share. And people, at least in my congressional district, understand that. They understand that we need to organize for something different. Like we need all these things. And one of the things that also comes up in the phone bank that I'm really proud of is that they understand that there's a connection between big money in politics and dirty money from the real estate industry and politics. So they are thirsty for that kind of working class representation that's not connected to the status quo and that's not going to be selling out the community once they get to Washington, because there's a lot of corporate Democrats that are running in this race that are taking huge amounts of money from oppressive sources of funding that are pushing our communities out of our neighborhoods. And we need to reclaim our politics. And the way that we do that is by centering political fundraising in a way that reflects the values and the needs of our communities. And like I said earlier, we are experiencing a gentrification crisis, a displacement crisis. So it's disrespectful to the housing justice movement space to take money that compromises you from fully being present in that fight.
Absolutely. So I saw that there are actually 12 of you running in this race, which is like,
Yeah.
Okay, so my first question is, how many of them entered after you, as a progressive, woman of color, gets in, how many of them then jumped in? Because I see that
Well,
a lot.
right. Well, actually, that was not my case. I was actually a late entrant into the race because as a working class, formerly homeless Latina woman, I had to rely on my job, to make ends meet for healthcare, and things like that. And I love my coworkers, where I was, but this is something that it was a process for me making this decision. And it was actually people in the community that knocked on my door and like, listen, we really want you to do this, like really think about it. And it took me months to make that leap. So there were people that already like were running, and then people in the community were like, well, we don't like the choices that you know, we are seeing right now. And you have been fighting alongside with us in the grassroots progressive space for a while now. And we trust you because we feel like you have the right values and you should really think about it. And if you do it and enter this race, I'll have your back. And, that's exactly like what's happened. And I'm so grateful to the grassroots movement space in New York City and in the country that have taken a leap of faith on our campaign. But it was, a long process for me, because I had to risk a lot to, take this step, to run full time, to leave my job. So it was a process. And I'm one of the few congressional candidates in the country right now that's running without health care. I also want to give a shout out to some of my matriarch sisters like Nabila, Corey Bush, and other women that are also running without health care as well. And these are the sacrifices that, unfortunately, working class people that want to run for these positions have to make. So that's why we have to re-envision our politics differently. And we need to make it easier for working class people to be able to run for these positions so that Congress and other levels of government can be more reflective of the voices on the ground. Because at the end of the day, Congress is the people's house. So being that it's the people's house, we need to make sure that, rich white old men like don't dominate that conversation, because America right now, United States of America, is increasingly diverse and global. And we need to make sure that our government and our politics represent the diversity that's on the ground, because the diversity that we have in this country is our strength. So I just, wanted to be clear on that. I was a late entrant into the race because of those reasons.
Right. No, it makes total sense.
Mhm.
Did I kind of scanned over some of the candidates? Are you the only actual real progressive within the 12 of you? Because it kind of came across that way.
Well, this is a situation. There's someone who's running who is a Republican in Democratic clothing, who's anti-women's rights, anti-LGBTQIA. So there's that. And there's also a bunch of corporate Democrats that are taking huge sums of money from real estate, from pharmaceutical companies, from charter schools. In terms of foreign policy, they are to the right of where I believe the rest of the congressional district is, because this is a very large immigrant community. So you have people from Yemen, you have people from Palestine, like African countries that live here. And it's important to have a foreign policy that centers people's humanity, their existence, and their self-determination, not only here in the Bronx, but abroad. And foreign policy definitely has an impact on immigration policy as well. So these are the things that kind of like distinguish me from everybody else who's running. I don't know if that means that I'm like to the left of everybody else, but I just know that our district is, very grassroots, very revolutionary. And, we take inspiration from movements like the Young Lords, the Black Panthers from back in the day. And, this campaign, in a way, in our humble way, we're trying to pay respect to our community ancestors and our movement leaders of the past, and learn from the mistakes that were done in the past, and learn from people that have been here in the Bronx for generations struggling and making this community what it is today. When the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s, when the landlords were burning their buildings for the insurance money, it was people in the community that stayed, that made this neighborhood what it is today. And, we need to look to places like the South Bronx for inspiration, and places like the South Bronx, in terms of the environmental justice movement. There's a very strong environmental justice space that's here. And it's because we have one of the highest levels of asthma respiratory illnesses in the entire country. And there's actually like one corporate Democrat that, knowing this history in the South Bronx and knowing the strength of the environmental justice movement, used his position as a vice chair of the DNC to vote against having a debate, a presidential debate on climate change. So that is not the kind of leadership that the South Bronx deserves. And you have like another one, you know, that takes donations from people with racist records that doesn't want to return the donations back. You have other people that don't even live in the Bronx, that they're from Manhattan, but they want to come here and tell us and like represent us without like breathing our air and drinking our water and going through these hardships, you know, so, and pushing rezonings where they came from in Manhattan. So that is not the kind of leadership that we need. We need revolutionary leadership that's going to center the working class, that's going to center the worker, like, you know, our communities, our values. And, you know, those people are not representative of where the district is and where they want to go. I can guarantee you that. So our campaign, we try to seek the guidance of the community in everything that we do. We try to seek the guidance of the community in terms of our platform. So even when we were creating the platform, the first thing that we did is, okay, let's test this platform. Let's door knock in the community. Let's ask people what they think. And overwhelmingly, they want a homes guarantee. They want universal child care, health care. They want us to fight for clean air and clean water in the form of a Green New Deal. And they want us to take on corporate, you know, players, the elite, Wall Street, and they understand, again, the connection between big money in politics, corruption, and lack of advocacy at every level of government. So the corporate Democrats that are there right now and the Republican and Democratic clothing that's running don't represent those values. So that's what I have to say about that.
Well, that's awesome. Then you stand out even more,
Yeah.
which is good. So, you know, first I digress, but your website, I've interviewed over 170 candidates, and your website is one of the top 5 I've ever seen.
You say that to everybody, though.
So it's done very well. It's very cohesive. It touches on like so many different platform ideas. It's just incredible. So props for the website, because I was like, wow, this is making my job really easy looking for questions and stuff. Sometimes I'm like, okay, now you got 3 things on here. Is that all you're running for? You know?
Yeah.
So good job on that website. It's awesome.
No, it's very like definitely a very ambitious website and platform. But one of the things I'm really, really proud of is that we centered language justice as part of the website. So it's not only in English, it's also in Spanish, it's in French, it's in Bangla, and it's also in Arabic as well. You know, to pay respect to the diversity of the community, so everybody can get a sense of what our message is.
Absolutely. And kind of on that note, I did read the article you have on Twitter about you speaking on Palestine. And that was something I don't know that I've ever had a candidate who wasn't running for like president or something that spoke on Palestine and stuff. People seem to not take it as seriously when they're just running for state offices and what have you. So it was really refreshing to see you talk about Palestine and also to share your progressive views on it. Do you want to just kind of briefly share what your thoughts are on Palestinian rights and also the way we as a country handle Israel?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. So I am honored to have received the endorsement of Jewish Voice for Peace. They're an incredible organization because they're at the front lines and they fight against white supremacy, anti-Semitism, bigotry, when it happens in the Jewish community. And I stand, you know, unapologetically against those things. I'm against those things unapologetically. But at the same time, we have to recognize the self-determination and the human dignity of people that live in Palestine that are suffering right now. And, you know, I was, you know, quoted in an article today where I said, that the Trump administration is actually not giving Palestine the necessary funding that it needs so it can overcome the coronavirus epidemic. And that's morally wrong, you know? I think that right now we need to take a transnational approach in everything that we do as it relates to COVID-19, because what happens in one community will eventually come to our shores. And we need to make sure that we take a transnational approach and that we're leading with love and empathy, in every area of the world. So I stand, with the Jewish community against anti-Semitism, and I also stand with the Palestinian community as well. And we need to promote their plight. We need to, safeguard their right for free speech and organizing so that they can raise awareness about what they're going through. And I am so grateful that, I'm using this platform to elevate that, because I think that Congress is not only a local or national position. I feel like it's also an opportunity to talk about international issues. And because the community that I'm running to represent is so diverse, and there's such a large immigrant population from, Palestine, Yemen, and, other parts of the world, I think that we need to be very intentional to make sure that a peace process in the Middle East includes the Palestinian community, because anything less than that is not a legitimate peace process. And I think that we need to demand that, and we need to fight for that. And I love my Palestinian brothers and sisters, and I love, my Jewish brothers and sisters. So we need to basically lead with our values. And also the reason I identify with it so much is I'm not an international policy expert. But I'm a Puerto Rican, Dominican woman. I grew up in the South Bronx. I did not grow up learning about Middle Eastern politics. But what I do know is that I have experienced a lot of things. I've seen my mom experience a lot of things and survive them. And, it's really important to center people who are marginalized, people who are suffering on the ground. And I think that we should not only apply that to our national, local politics, but we also need to take that approach at the international level as well. And we need to respect international law as it relates to what's happening in Palestine and Israel right now. And I think that we need to highlight the dignity of the Palestinian people, and the vision that they have for themselves and their country. And I'm ready to defend that, and I'm ready to seek guidance from Palestinians on the ground so they can continue to educate me on how I should be fighting and how I should be centering their plight in Congress.
Absolutely. Kind of branching off of you stating that you have a lot of immigrants in your community. I did see on your platform that you want to abolish ICE. Can you kind of touch on why and essentially what you would hope the outcome would be?
Yeah, so I think we definitely need to, defund, ICE, because ICE is terrorizing our communities. I think that we need to keep families together at the border. I think that we should not criminalize immigration, because when you cause destabilization abroad, that impacts immigration patterns. So we have a lot of responsibility to bear in that conversation. I think that we need to repeal the 1996 immigration laws. And I think that in immigration court, everybody should be guaranteed a lawyer. I mean, I know that here in the housing justice movement space, they have something that they've instituted that's called right to counsel. When you can't afford a lawyer, if you live in a certain zip code, because it's a pilot program, they assign you with a lawyer. The same thing in immigration court. Everybody should have access to, state their case. But I think that immigration should not be something that should be criminalized. And also, what's happening a lot is that ICE is being used to terrorize immigrant workers when they stand up for their rights, when they're being exploited by bosses that want to swindle their wages and not pay them. So then what's happening in many parts of the country, and even here, in the Bronx, is that when people want to organize so they can get the wages that they're correctly entitled to, their bosses say, well, if you keep complaining and you keep organizing, I'm going to call ICE and I'm going to deport you. So those people that are undocumented, that are demonstrating immense courage to fight for their dignity, their human dignity, should absolutely not be penalized for that and deported. And we need to put the blame like where it is, because that's like a criminal act if you really think about it. Stealing people's wages, that is not, the right thing to do. So we need to do what Bernie Sanders was proposing. He was a proponent of the Whistleblower Act. That's something that I would love to explore in Congress, and instituting a whistleblower visa for people in those situations that are undocumented, so that they won't be deported when they demonstrate that courage to organize and fight for their dignity.
Absolutely. You do support the Green New Deal and federal jobs guarantee. So I guess I want to say, why do you support the federal jobs guarantee, and what other parts of the Green New Deal are you excited about?
Well, I love the Green New Deal. I'll repeat it again because I said it earlier. The South Bronx has an amazing environmental justice community. We have faced a lot of environmental racism over decades because of the way that our built environment has introduced highways that have cut up our neighborhoods and have polluted our air and our waterways. So that's why we have one of the highest rates of asthma and respiratory illnesses in the country, because of failed urban planning policies like the ones that Robert Moses instituted back in the day. So we're still reeling from the effects of bad urban planning choices, not centering communities of color, and also bad economic policy choices that our current leadership in the Bronx has undertaken in terms of, courting companies like Amazon, right, that have connections to ICE. Courting companies like Fresh Direct, for instance, that they introduce a lot of trucks into the community that release a lot of diesel fuel emissions that are polluting the lungs of our children in Ma Haven, Port Morris, Hunts Point. So there's a lot of issues, systemic issues, that we need to address. And the environmental justice space here has been instrumental in coming up with different solutions. And we need to look to them for guidance in terms of like climate justice issues. And any implementation of a Green New Deal, as much as I love it, absolutely has to take into consideration the frontline environmental justice space, because it's the directly impacted that should shape any policy that is being proposed in a community. So that's what I'll say with that. And with the federal jobs guarantee, absolutely. One of the other issues that we're experiencing is a lack of jobs in our neighborhoods. So we need a federal guarantee. And we also need to look to the homes guarantee as well, and the Green New Deal, as a partner in delivering jobs to people in the community and hiring people locally as well, and training people here in the community, to access the jobs of the future, which are going to be green related. If we're talking about building 12 million units of housing for the next 10 years, that would be an incredible source of jobs for people in the neighborhood. And we also need to look at infrastructure as well and put people to work, coming up with innovative infrastructure projects that will make our country run and our roads better and put people to work. And identify young people and strengthen the union movement as well, make it easier for people to be able to unionize. Right now, the labor movement is under assault in this country, and we need to ban right to work laws that are making it difficult for the labor movement to flourish. We need to, institute card checking in every state to empower the labor movement to be as strong as it used to be. So we need basically like a whole revamping of, our society and our government right now. And we need to fight for the common worker and the people that, don't have enough food on the table. We need to fight for our farmers too. My dad actually was a farmer. He used to grow something that's called plantains. You know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he would grow plantains in Puerto Rico. So we need to support our farmers as well. So yeah, and I'm definitely going to be pushing for a federal jobs guarantee in the community and our country, because people need to work and they need that dignity. And once they get to work, they need to be able to organize, and they need a strong labor movement to back them up when the bosses are committing abuses against them.
Absolutely. And I digress a bit, but criminal justice reform. You want to end cash bail, private prisons, and solitary confinement. Why is that something you're passionate about?
No, definitely. I mean, Black and brown communities have been targeted in terms of racial profiling, and it's basically like it's a whole economy that's based on like, Black and brown bodies like being locked up in jail, in the prison system. And in many ways, like it kind of prevents us from amassing as much political power as we can. So we need to disinvest from the prison industrial complex, from the military industrial complex. We need to take those monies and invest in domestic social programs where we tackle things like poverty, food, housing. We need to, decriminalize poverty as well. And if we address it from that perspective, we can prevent the number of people in our communities that end up in that situation. So instead of like building jails, building a box where we are locked up, right, because we're being penalized because we're poor, instead of doing that, why don't we take that money and reinvest it in supportive social programs that will lead with love and empathy to prevent people from ending up in that situation to begin with? Why don't we like create more youth recreation programs to give like our young people a place to play and to a place to socialize after they get out of school? So I think that we have the wrong priorities in this country, and we need to re-envision what that looks like. And building prisons and new jails is not the way. There's actually a 5-borough jail-based plan that the mayor pushed, that certain people that are running in this race promoted. And I think it was like something like 11 insane amount of money, like millions and millions of dollars, to build like these new jails when we're experiencing homelessness, we're experiencing issues in our transportation infrastructure, like issues in our education system. You're going to take this money that people are paying taxes, like basically fund, and you're going to give it to corporations and real estate developers to build these new jails. That money is not going to go to the community. It's going to go to the people that are building those things. So, that money needed to be used to improve like our education, our parks, like our housing. So I feel very strongly that, we need to put an end to that and re-envision this funding so that we could prevent people from ending up in the prison system, because at the end of the day, like it's a separate economy that's helping somebody else out that's building the jails and running the jails, and it's disempowering us politically. I think that we also need to re-envision the 13th Amendment of the Constitution as well, because right now, if you end up in the prison system, it's basically forced labor. It's basically slavery wages that you're being paid. So we need to, re-envision the 13th Amendment to take a look at that. Because just because you end up in the prison system, it doesn't mean that you should be treated as a slave.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if you saw the documentary 13, but anyone who didn't needs to, because it was just, whoa. It was hardcore. So I'm going to kind of branch off a bit, but something that, rightly so, everyone's talking about right now is Mr. George Floyd. We're all just beyond disgusted. I mean, as a person of color, how do you even process these things? Because I know how disgusted we all are, but as a person of color, how do you deal with that?
No, I mean, it's really painful, what happened, and it's a testament to what we need to change in this country. We've been desensitized. The criminal justice system does not serve us. And it goes back to the legacy that this country has with slavery, and how slavery is something that we need to really study and learn about in our public education system, because our history that we learn in school is whitewashed. You don't see the contributions of, African Americans and, the Latino community, the Native American community in those history books. So we need a reckoning in this country, and we really need to like have honest conversations about the legacy of slavery and the development of this country immediately, or else these things are, going to keep happening. And it's a testament to how flawed the criminal justice system is in our country, and it's a shame. My heart goes out to people like Jamal Bowman, who's running for Congress in the 16th congressional district. He, poured his heart out today, in reference to what happened and how Black men in America are just getting killed left and right, and no one cares. No one cares, no one cares about their humanity, and we really need to center that. And I think that what is missing again in our politics and, our institutions is love. And I think that we have forgotten our humanity, and we need to reclaim that, because what happened, to that young man is embarrassing. It's devastating. And my heart goes out to his family and his friends and his loved ones.
We've learned today that the cops were fired. Is that enough?
No, it's not enough. No, it's not enough. No, not even close. That should have never happened. And more needs to be done to address, what happened.
Absolutely.
And we need more. I would also go as far as to say that we need more oversight, in our police departments as well. We need members of the community to basically like be on a community oversight board, which is also like on our platform. There's no community like accountability in, our law enforcement right now. Like we need a balance. And, we need to make sure that like there's oversight, that people are, calling things out, and that there's like kind of like that you're seeing that you're the eyes and ears of the community, and that you're out there, and that you're holding law enforcement accountable. And I don't think that there's a system in place like that. And I think that we need to fight for that in law enforcement.
One of the, and this is like really digressing, one of the things that stood out to me when you were recommended was I was scanning your Twitter page, and you said something about just like 2016, they're going to do like a Pied Piper thing. And I was like, oh, yes, yes. Like we have a candidate who is keeping it real about how bad we got the shaft in 2016.
Right.
And then I saw how when Bernie got back on the ballot in New York, you pretty much like re-endorsed him that day. And you're like, I endorse Bernie. And I'm like, yeah. So what was that like, being, a New Yorker and having Cuomo be like, sorry, you might not get to vote?
I mean, I'm so happy that that ruling was overturned. I think it was definitely unconstitutional. And I'm proudly going to cast my vote for Bernie Sanders. And I couldn't be happier with the result, because the beauty of that is that we need to organize as a community and continue to center our demands at the Democratic National Convention later on this summer. So that's why we need people to, congratulations. That's why we need people like you. We need to like vote for people like you. And we need to basically like organize so that the changes that Bernie Sanders and the movement fought for back in 2016 can become permanent in the DNC. So, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to casting my vote for Bernie. And I could not be more thrilled. And then, what that's going to do is motivate, the base to come out and hopefully support down ballot progressives like me and, many other people in the country that are running under the values of Bernie Sanders and what he's been trying to fight for.
Absolutely. When does your, I know the election is June 23rd. When do you guys start getting your ballots?
Well, so that's actually happening now. So what the governor has instituted is that everybody that's registered to vote gets a application to apply for a ballot. And then you submit your application, and then the next step is to get, your ballot in the mail, which I think disenfranchises voters. I think that we should just have a system where we just have mail-in voting, like across the board, that everybody just gets mailed a ballot. Because in low information communities that are not as connected to the political process, that's basically kind of like, if you think about it, a barrier to entry. And New York State, even though we're supposed to be really progressive, actually has one of the most regressive stances as it relates to civic engagement and voter engagement in the entire country. There are some regressive states in our country that cite New York State as a precedent, for instance. They're like, well, if South Carolina has been noted to say, well, if New York State did it, like, why can't we? And it's a shame, because we're supposed to be this progressive beacon in the country. And it's a travesty that we constantly, or, our leadership here constantly disenfranchises voters. So I feel that, it may cause a lot of confusion, but what we're doing in our campaign, we're like phone banking every day, like walking people through the process. And that's kind of like, where it's at. But, it's a two-step process to be able to exercise your right to vote. It's not something that we should be supporting right now. I think that everybody should just get mailed a ballot.
Absolutely. I'm in Pennsylvania. I just had to do it too. Apply for, like, I've been voting over 20 years. Mm-hmm. Why do I need to apply? Is crazy.
Right.
But they weren't going to stop me. No, I was voting for my man. So you're going to have to deal with me. Yeah. So what is, if you could leave, Courtney brought up a real good point. Who is going to count the vote? Are you guys going to be able to have volunteers, or do we have trust that it's going to be legit? Or
I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that, people try to do the right thing. But, me being a Bernie Sanders supporter, watching everything that's gone on since 2015, I'm sure that you heard, I think in Brooklyn, like when he was running, like there was like hundreds of thousands of voters that all of a sudden were purged from the voter rolls. So, we can only wonder, right? But the only thing that we can do as campaigns, right, that are running insurgent campaigns, is to have all the information that we need to educate people and walk them through the process, and just, be able to guide them at every step of the way. So that's what we're doing in our campaign. We're calling people saying, hey, did you get your application to apply for the ballot? It seems like a lot of them haven't gotten the application yet, but they, will be. And then we're like, well, when you get the application to mail in your ballot, then, you have to return it by a certain date so that you can get the actual ballot. Think of how wasteful this is. I think that there was someone that was saying on Twitter like a couple of weeks ago that there's going to be like an envelope shortage or like a stamp shortage or something like that. So we'll see what happens, but we're just guiding people every step of the way. I'm skeptical of the process, but, we're going to, go with the process the way it is and make sure that we're armed with the information that we need to empower voters to exercise their God-given democratic right to be able to vote. And that's where we're at.
Absolutely. As far as to our viewers, a lot of us are feeling a little bit defeatist lately with our prospective Dem nominee. What is something that you can, that you tell people when you're like, okay, we have no progressive in the race anymore? Why should we keep fighting? What is something you say to inspire people to keep going?
Yeah. Well, what I tell people is that we still have a movement. As much as I love Bernie Sanders, he even said, even that sign that you have behind you, it says, not me, us, right? So I think that now is the time to take that movement to the next level. Now is the time to support down ballot progressives, communities of color, candidates of color, like working class women all across the country. And we need to fight to reclaim the soul of our party. We need to continue to organize so that we could take back our power as a country and realize that really organizing, community organizing, is one of the main solutions that we have to affect real change. As we saw here, the example that I gave you earlier about the Housing Justice for All movement in New York, nobody thought that like we were going to get one of the most progressive pro-tenant rent reform laws that New York State has seen in a generation. And that happened because of organizing. So I think that when we organize as a community and when we remember our values and our plight and recognize what we have in common with each other, and we are intentional about creating a multiracial working class coalition. And when we recognize the commonalities that people in the South Bronx have, or people in Mississippi and Alabama and the Midwest, I think that, you know, we can organize across the board throughout the country. And that makes me incredibly hopeful for the future. And we're doing it with our campaign. Like, our campaign has people from all over the country helping us make phone calls, like different parts of the world are like, you know, calling into our phone banks. And that makes me hopeful because we built something really special in this campaign. And that's, you know, the same thing for like a lot of other campaigns throughout the country. So we have to like continue to support the progressive movement, you know, the grassroots movement, because I feel like the word progressive has been co-opted by a lot of corporate Democrats. So I'm trying to figure out like a way of redefining that term or like using another term. But we need to build like grassroots political power. We need like a populist movement in America that centers the working class unapologetically, because it's always the workers that create the wealth of this country, even though they try to brainwash us otherwise. So I feel incredibly hopeful to fight for things like a homes guarantee, universal childcare, healthcare, to center policies that, you know, would have made a difference in my family's life and in the people of my community, like had we had access to them earlier. I'm really excited to, you know, fight for strong labor movement because I didn't grow up in a union. But I feel like if we had learned about a union when my mom was going through all these issues, maybe our lives would have been different. You know, I feel like we need union education. We need to expose people to the power of unions you know, how important unions are to like, you know, our well-being and how like you kind of get a sense of a family like within the union space. And you get like access to networks there that can help you if you're in a tough spot. So I think that, you know, I'm really hopeful to be able to fight for those things and to be able to fight for transnational solidarity all over the world and to fight for people's human dignity and to really like stand with them in solidarity, like with love. And that makes me really excited to build those relationships in the community, because at the end of the day, it's about building relationships and being there for your brothers and sisters. And I'm excited. I'm really excited, you know, like hopefully we win this election and we do that and we build dual power in our communities and we center the most marginalized and oppressed and give them a real seat at the policymaking table so that they can chart their course and create laws that will benefit everybody in society and look to them for guidance. I mean, even in my kitchen cabinet, I'm surrounded by people that are from the LGBTQIA community, people that you know, are disabled, that are in wheelchairs. And I want to give a shout out to the disability justice movement space too, because I feel that disabled people in our communities are going through a lot, you know, in terms of poverty, in terms of not being able to be seen or heard. And I think that we need to fight for that community in many ways, in more ways than we've done. So I'm really excited to meet those challenges head on, to organize with people like you, to continue to support independent media spaces as well, because as we've seen, the corporate media is just not cutting it, and they erase people like us from the conversation. There was a Newsweek article that I think you had mentioned that I was erased from the article, and they were giving free press to the Republican and Democratic clothing in this race and giving him like free money, which is kind of like what they did with Trump. back in 2016. So I called them out and I was like, listen, you're going to talk about like an anti-AOC candidate in this guy, but then you're giving him like all this play and all this like free advertising. And then you're not even mentioning a Latina woman that was actually endorsed by AOC. And I was like, you know what? Like, this is a Pied Piper strategy. Like, we need to end this. So, that's why I'm so grateful to the independent media space. And thank you so much for giving me a platform. And if I were to win this election, I want to come back on your show and support you. And we need to
Absolutely.
continue to support the independent media space, because if it hadn't been for the independent media space, like I wouldn't have like the amount of media attention that our campaign is currently benefiting from. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. And I will definitely reach out to some of my comrades who have their own shows and see what I can do. um, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. Where can people find you? Your Twitter, your website, all that stuff.
Yeah, of course. So you can find us at lopezforthepeople.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Samelys Lopez, on Instagram at Samelys Lopez as well, and on Facebook at Samelys Lopez NYC. And then if you sign up for a phone bank, like what you'll do is you'll just basically like hang out with the campaign, because we do the phone banks as part of a Zoom community. So you won't be doing the phone calls by yourself. And then we are also engaging in mutual aid as part of our phone banks, and just calling people in the district, as checking in on them to see if their mental health is doing good, and like to see if we can provide them food. Because as I said earlier, hunger is a really big issue in the district right now. So I encourage you to sign up and to have like really cool conversations with people that are uplifting, and that will reduce the sense of isolation that people here in the district are experiencing. So come through and help us make those phone calls so that we can win this election and be there for our neighbors in the South Bronx.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much. Thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow I will be going back on Ron Placone's show at 2 p.m. And then I just got a surprise notice that Michaela Wilkes is coming on tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m., which I'm so hype about. And Leslie Lee the third is coming on after her. So I'm doing 3 shows tomorrow. Which is kind of crazy, but I've done it before. But again, thank you so much for joining us. I wish you best of luck.
Thank you so much for giving me this platform. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.